Hi there. There's a number of reasons why wisdom shouldn't stay hidden. And especially as we're living in these times of very, very much tumultuous, lots of change, lots of tension, lots of fear. When I've been having conversations with men for the last several months now, building the wisdom trust, we talk about, and I use that word wisdom in the title very clearly and intentionally, because for me, this period of midlife and beyond is really about the accrual of life experiences that culminate in wisdom, whether we're cognizant of it or not, whether we speak of it that way or not. It is true. So these are the wisdom years. That's the term that I use. Other authors have used that term as well. So it's not new, it's not novel, it's not original, but I think it's applicable. And the trust part of it is really that we're imbuing within the community, the movement that we're building together, a trust around holding space for each other, around deeper and richer conversations. But the interesting thing that I want to talk about is how so many men underestimate what they have to offer. Even in terms of some of the podcasts I've recorded, of which 6 of them are now live, depending on when you watch this, there'll be a lot more if you watch it in the future. But a lot of them at the end, when I ask them for a wisdom nugget, what would they like to share with listeners and viewers? A lot of them say, well, I don't know how much wisdom I have to share. And even when I'm having the conversations outside of the podcast interviews, there is this reluctance for people to acknowledge that they do hold wisdom. They are containers of wisdom. And I think that that comes from a lot of places. Something that came up in one of our live conversations today in the Wisdom Trust was around growing up in an environment where there can be a lot of downplaying of anything that's perceived as boasting or egoic, right? You don't brag. You're not a braggart. You be humble. In certain communities that may be more prevalent than others. People that were thought to be too much that way, and where I grew up and what I heard in rural central Alberta were too big for your britches. So people who were a bit showy or a bit had a little bit of that capacity to kind of boast themselves. We're said to be too big for their britches, and so when we're taught that at a young age, we may think that at this stage, even carrying all of that forward, that I don't have that much to offer. I don't want to be the braggart or whatever, but it's not about that. It's about four things. It's about lived experience. So no one can downplay the the life experiences that we all have and the value that is gleaned from those. Like, what are we learning from our lived experiences? If not wisdom, then what? Right? So lived experiences are essential to living and to growing into becoming something more than we were last decade, the decade before that. And by more, I don't necessarily mean in that sort of uh, accumulation more. I'm talking about more of a sense of who we are, a sense of what life has taught us, and all of those lived experiences. And they can be relational, so that can be intimate relationships, familial relationships, relationships with peers, with neighbors, with colleagues, how we live and interact with others. Those are lived experiences, and we learn from those. They're valuable. There's work experiences. So, a lot of us in this generation may have had one career or a few careers throughout their life. Nowadays, it's lots of careers, it seems. But so we learn and grow a lot and have a lot of learned experience in the professional realm as well as the personal realm. Both of those are good feeding grounds for mentorship, and mentors are wisdom fonts, right? And so we all mentor and provide wisdom in ways, whether again we're calling it that or not. But my thing is, let's own it, let's step into it. We make a lot of mistakes in our lives, and before I was involved in coaching for the last 5 years or so, uh, mistakes were, for me, they were something that I just couldn't live with. I would feel so humiliated when I was caught out in making a mistake. And again, just like the stuff around being taught as kids, don't be too big for your britches, we are also taught that mistakes are failure. We go to school and we get these red slashes on our essays or reports or our exams, and those mistakes are really registered into us as failures. And so even within your family, when you screwed up, you were yelled at. In the day, you were given a little bit of a, thing they don't do anymore. So mistakes were looked at in the younger years as being huge failures. But that's not true. And in the coaching world, what I've learned is you've got to make the mistakes to learn and to grow. And you're going to do that. And think of starting a new job. You're going to make some screw ups in those first weeks and months, right? They say it takes a full 2 years to fully adapt to a new work environment and all of the tasks imbued in it. So mistakes are part of life's journey. And so in terms of wisdom, that also goes into that wisdom bucket, if you will, that account of wisdom. That's another deposit. So we have these lived experiences, lived mistakes that help to uh, provide us with wisdom that we can share with others. Life is tough. And like one of my coaches would always say, living is hard. It's hard to be a human being. And in the the hard to be a human being stuff, we develop resilience. All of us have developed resilience in some way or another. We're still here, right? And so resilience is something that, we can be proud of for having persevered, having gotten through a lot of the challenges that life presents to us. And I say this in every single one of the my yoga classes that I teach. Life is going to throw stuff at us every single day, and how we navigate that stuff matters, right? And what I teach in those contexts is be resilient in your asana practice on the mat, because that teaches you how to be resilient out there in life. So we learn this stuff through trial and error. We learn it through, those who walked before us and modeled things for us. But we learn how to really hold ourselves steady and to navigate those, proclivities, those challenges that life is going to give us. And it will give us that. It will continue to give us that until our last breath. That's just what being a human's about. We have challenges and we have to persevere and get through them. The last one I want to talk about is perspective. And perspective is very interesting. And I've pretty much noticed with each new decade, there's a shift, right? So a lot of us, and you may or may not agree with this, but a lot of us in our 20s have a certain hubris and arrogance around thinking we kind of know what life is about, right? And that's good, because that gives us this boldness, this vibrato to step into life and to think we can and take on all these challenges that are ahead of us and move into it. That's really, really important. But that perspective starts to shift as we get into our 30s. I would say 30s are, when you're getting into full adulthood, and 40s. And some of that is a softening because of some of the challenges that life throws at us. There can be a bit of a rude awakening at times. Maybe the jobs that we thought we were qualified for or should be in, we're not quite there yet. That can be very humbling. So the perspective shifts can start to change. And when I was in my 20s, I was quite an idealist. And then I did go back to university at 28, so a bit of a mature student. And I studied very left kind of leaning political economy stuff. And so that made me really, really, let's say very, very liberal in my perspectives, right? Let's just use that terminology. And so, but I've found over the years that shifted. And I used to notice that as a younger person. It's like, why are older people seeming to be more sort of conservative with a small c, right? And a little less maybe extreme in terms of their views, right? uh, and that's what I've noticed as my life has progressed and moving through my 30s. That kind, there was a softening, a shifting in some of that stuff again in my 40s. And then by my 50s it was kind of like, it doesn't actually matter so much. It's the lived experience, not whether you're on this side of the spectrum or that side of the spectrum, right? Left and right leaning, I'm talking about that sort of thing. And some of you would cringe hearing that out loud, especially given the tenor of some countries right now. But it is true. Our perspectives start to shift. And I think that for a lot of us, these life lessons, these experiences of the family stuff, the work stuff, the financial stuff, like maybe that you have some financial experiences through life, you make some shitty decisions along the way, like who hasn't done that? And maybe you don't end up with that vision of who you thought you were going to be at a certain stage in life. And maybe you did, and bravo if you did, that's amazing. But even that is a perspective shift, a reality shift for a lot of us. And it's like, well, even if I did accumulate all that stuff, and if I do actually have it, does that make me any more content and full and rich as a human than not? Right. So all of these perspective things shift. Your priorities are part of that. Right. So what really makes a difference in your life in terms of where you're putting your energy? So men who may be work oriented, if we don't shift from that and we come into the 60s, 70s and beyond, where that kind of work, the paid labor work, takes on a different perspective, our identities can be really, really disrupted, because who am I without that, fill in the blank of what you've been doing? But you are so much more than that. And so the perspective shift around who am I and what matters. These are all part of life's journey, and these are all part of the accrual of wisdom. And if you think about this, there's really this question I think is good because it can help us to reflect. So, who benefited because an older person invested in you? So, throughout your life, there's been older people investing in you. And who benefited from that? Well, your family, if you have kids and that stuff, certainly they would have benefited. Your colleagues, your peers, those who worked with you, your friends would have benefited from all the things that you learned from an older person who invested their wisdom in you. So it's very, very important. I look at my grandpa and actually my grandma and my grandpa, who were farm people, and they were so sweet and so simple. But I remember some of the, like, I don't mean this simple in a pejorative way. I mean, their lives were very simple, right? Living on a farm, it's like you do this hard work, but you do it every day. There's not all this drama and some of the stuff like living in the city, for example, presents. So they have these ways of being that were um, so elegant and so smart and so efficient, and they would teach us that stuff. Like my grandpa was teaching us about recycling and how you don't throw things away. This is how you use things intelligently, when I was a little kid. And so the recycle, reuse, and repurpose, or whatever they were, those 3 R's or whatever that became common parlance in the late 80s and the 90s, that was happening for me in the 60s when I was a little boy. So these are all examples of how older people, those with the wisdom, invest in us. And you would have your own examples. It could be, another one for me is my grade 6 teacher. She was amazing. She treated us like these humans. She didn't treat us like little kids. And it was the best year of my scholastic life, was grade 6, because I had this amazing older person, obviously a teacher, sharing her wisdom with me as a human, not as a pupil or a 11, 12 year old. So I'm going to leave you with a reflection question. What life experiences have shaped you in a way that might benefit someone today? So, what are the life experiences that have shaped you in a way that might help someone else today? You've got a lot of them. So, I'm leaving you with that, and we will see you again